So today you're going to listen to an interview I did with Stuart Meaker. Now, Stuart Meaker currently plays for Sussex. He was with Surrey for nearly 10 years. Now, Stuart played international one-day cricket back in 2012 versus India. He received his Surrey cap, which isn't given at the beginning of your career. It's awarded when Surrey kind of deem you deserving of it, and he received it actually only after a couple of years playing for them. What's interesting with Stuart, and hopefully you'll find it interesting, was his view on what high performance is, and the fact that he felt that he wasn't high performance, and I'll let him explain why a bit later on. I really appreciate how honest he was, how injuries took their toll on him, but how it actually impacted his rhythm, and then psychologically feeling for the first time to not have control over the ball. And I found that fascinating. I found that kind of battle, I guess, he had within himself to try and get back to where he feels he is now. It's a really interesting story. I first heard about Stuart as a 13, 14-year-old bowling nearly 90 miles an hour. People spoke very highly of him throughout his kind of time at Cranley, but also in the early part of his career. And he will say he kind of skyrocketed up and then just couldn't kick on again. Because from what I took from the interviews, he's not ready just to kind of plod along. He's ready to get back at it. What does high performance mean to you?
I was thinking about this one. For me, yes, you've got to be playing at a certain level. So you've got to have a little bit of something about you, okay. But the high performance for me is when you've got a little bit of something about you, but you're replicating that over and over and over again, to the point where they trust that when you play, they know exactly what they're going to get from you. Okay, so you look at James Anderson, classic example, or even Joe Root. Now he's getting to that point where it's like, that when Joe Root is playing, he's going to score runs, or when James Anderson is playing, he's going to take wickets. And I see it quite a lot. You get some guys who come through the system where they're shooting stars, and probably, to be fair, to a certain extent, a bit like myself, where a shot to arise pretty quickly, a lot of expectation, and never, a few injuries at the wrong time, whatever, but I never quite managed to sort of cement that place where people knew exactly what they were going to get. They were happy that I could perform at that level constantly, day in, day out, and yeah, I ended up sort of falling by the wayside. But you're ones that the high performers for me, you always hear their names. It's because that day in, day out, they're always going to perform. That's high performance.
Because that's one of the kids today, because I told him that I was going to interview you, and he was like, what do you reckon Stu will say about what's high performance? And I said, well, do you think Stu's high performance? He goes, yeah, of course he is. And I said, why? And he goes, well, he's played international cricket, he's county cricket, he's done all this and that. But it's interesting, you're kind of indicating there that you don't see yourself as high performance.
To an extent, yes. If you're looking at it from an outside point of view, yeah, people go, I played county cricket, I played for England, blah, blah, blah. But that isn't high performance for me. You can almost get there to a certain extent with a degree of natural ability. What keeps you there and what ensures that you stay at that level is high performance, is reaching that point where you've mastered your skills. Teams know what they're going to get from you. They know that come hell or high water, you're not going to have a bad day where you go missing or this, that, and the other. It's just Mr. Consistent. I know what I'm going to get. I trust that he's going to perform at that level. For me, too often throughout my career, I've had days where I've gone missing, if that makes any sense. So on my good days, I'm great. I can compete up there with the best. But there's too many bad days and too many inconsistent days in between. And that for me is the difference. The high performance is a consistency. Johnny Wilkinson, for example, reason why he was such a high performer is because he performed all the time. He was consistent with his kicking, consistent with his training. He was consistently high performing. That is it. That is what it is for me. You'll get other kickers who will have their days where they just go missing and they'll lose it for the team. Johnny Wilkinson, day in, day out, he performed over and over and over, consistently over and over and over. And I think, watching Ollie Pope now, he's got the ability, he's got the drive. All that he needs to do, obviously, other than cement his place because he's still quite young, you'll see he will perform consistently over and over and over if he puts in that extra bit. Bit like watching Joe Root now, bit like watching Ben Stokes when he was going through that period of, reinventing himself, and he knuckled down with his fitness. He trained harder than every single other person in the team, and he ended up winning a World Cup and pulling off one of the greatest Test victories of all time. That's where the high performance is. It's not that you could get there on ability. It's I'm consistently producing the goods day in, day out.
I really kind of caught your name. Was it 2005 Ashes that England won? And they were doing their street parade, and there was an interview. And I've always remembered this because I don't know who it was, but he was obviously quite high up in the ECB. And they were saying, look, we're going to have longevity. This isn't just going to be a one-off victory. We already know who are going to be the next blah, 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 blah. And then they said, we know who's going to be the next Freddie Flintoff. It's this guy called Stuart Meaker. And I will always remember it. But very well known at a very young age with a high expectation. Do you think that helped or hindered?
When you play this game for long enough, you know that a lot of the stuff that goes out in the media is often quite it's a bit hyperbole, as it were, and it's them speaking certain things that aren't necessarily a fact just yet. The fact that I was in their plans at the 2005, how old would I have been? I've been 15, 16 or something like that. Like, how would they know? Like, I would have been involved in the Ashes series in however many years' time. I showed an X factor skill at that young age, fair enough. But to say, yeah, we've got plans for these people going on further, anything can happen in that short space of time. The expectation, mate, all I cared about was just running and bowling as fast as I could. So nothing changed from that point of view. The expectation, that was everything that they wanted to put on me or on the game. I didn't really pay that much attention to it.
Did it impact your last few years at school, knowing that the contracts were probably coming, and professional cricket looked like it was a kind of a certainty? Did it impact your thought process, your studies at all, or?
No, the only way it impacted my studies was because school cricket fell on the Saturday, and then my organic chemistry module suddenly suffered. I was still so driven. I hadn't proved anything, at that age. I even still at the age of 18, having left the school and being quite involved in Surrey, going on their pre-season tour, I didn't have it as a given that I was going to be a professional cricketer. I thought it was likely going to happen, but it wasn't a given. And so there was a desire. I want to play cricket. I want to play professionally. It was even to the point where I had a place booked at Oxford Brookes, and I took a gap year. Even still, I was like, well, if it doesn't go well, I'll just go straight to uni. Luckily, things did go well, and I got offered another contract sort of halfway through the year, and ended up sort of cancelling my place at Oxford Brookes. But for me, it was never an expectation thing. I was never like, I'm better than everyone because everyone's talking about me. That never occurred to me.
And I think you touched upon it at the beginning, how your career went from kind of leaving school with expectations, or potentially that's probably not the right word, but there was an anticipation that there's this boy who can bowl at 90 odd miles an hour, and you went from being a schoolboy cricketer to suddenly going on pre-season with Surrey, to suddenly playing for Surrey, to suddenly being involved in international cricket very quickly. Did it come too soon, or actually as you went up the levels, were you like, I feel like I can be here? This is actually an environment that I'm good enough for. Did self-doubt come into it at all?
No, I think, you know, I do think that at the time when I got involved into the England setup, there was very much, I'm still raw. I've got talent, but I'm not necessarily, you know, there were other guys that were doing much better than me in county cricket throughout the season. I was like, well, how am I getting to go here? But that was just the way that the ECB worked, you know, and you'll see that with a lot of some players. They tended to want to promote youngsters who had gone through the system that they had invested money in, because it justified their budgets in a way. So I was fortunate that I'd gone through that system, and I was someone that had been earmarked. And in fairness, when I was eventually picked for England, ironically, I was picked in the one format which I'd done okay in, but hadn't like nailed down a place at Surrey by any means, you know. So the fact that I was suddenly now playing for England after only having played, you know, a handful of one-day games for Surrey and not actually nailed it. You know, Jade Dernbach was nailing it. He dominated county cricket, and so he deserved to get his place. I hadn't really dominated one-day cricket in county stuff, but suddenly I found myself playing one-day cricket for England. And so I was like, but ECB used that as a means of, like, it was a test to see whether someone was good enough at that level to then go on and, you know, could be, you know, someone that they use at international level. Ironically, I was dominating in red ball cricket. You know, I'd had 2 seasons where I'd gotten pretty much identical championship wickets and at the same bowling average as well, which is weird. And I was like, yeah, you know, if I'm there, I could play. I'm ready to go on and play at a high level. You know, I was knocking people's stumps over for fun. I was getting 10-fers, 5-fers fairly regularly. And yeah, I was there mentally. I was like, right, what's the next step? Where do I go next? So when I did eventually go, I was kind of like, oh, you know, I'm feeling like I'm in a good place for this. But I was also like, in white ball cricket, I'm not entirely sure. You know, so I get that.
I'm fascinated about, and what I spoke to Ollie about, and by the time people watch this, they'd have seen the one with Ollie. He talks about his first ball in Test cricket. Remember back to that kind of when the captain's like, right, shoot, warm up, here we go, your first ball. Do you still remember it?
Hey,
what you were thinking about, and was it nerves? Was it excitement? Were you just thinking, please don't let this be a wide?
I didn't sleep the entire night before because I was thinking, do I bounce him or do I just hit length? No, I'm going to bounce him. I'm going to bounce him. And I was in bed, like practicing my action and visualizing this ball. I could not sleep, mate. And like, it was even still right up to the point where I was, you know, eventually called on to bowl. I still had that debate in my mind. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I want to tear away. I want to announce myself in first class cricket. And then I chickened out. I was like, no, just land it on the pitch. Land it on the pitch. And yeah, mate, I was incredibly nervous. Of course I was. But I think at that point, instinct kind of just takes over. And you've got to bear in mind as well. So, you know, India, as a place to play cricket, it's the only time as a cricketer, in my opinion, you feel like a rock star. You know, it's a real shame watching it at the moment where there's no crowds, and you know, you don't get that same buzz, that same vibe, because it adds to it. You feel like, oh my God, there's so many people watching me play. We don't normally get that unless it's a T20 in England. So I was hell of a nervous. I wanted to do really well, but there definitely was just an element of, right, instinct just going to take over, and you just you know, fit into that little bit of that realm of, I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna run up and bowl. I'm not thinking about it too much. I'm just gonna run up and bowl. And ironically, I ended up bowling a maiden in my first over in international cricket. I'm pretty sure there was some fixing going on there, because I don't think I'd done that in my entire career. So, I mean, it was a dream start. And then I think the following over I got, you know, I think I got hit for 4, and then I nicked off Ajinkya Rahane. Rahane, in my first wicket, and he was batting like a god at the time, and suddenly I was like, oh my god, what's going on here? So that certainly calmed me down, and it, you know, it was an amazing feeling. But hey, I was so nervous, so nervous.
You were someone who kind of, we call it state anxiety, so kind of situation specific anxiety. Were you someone as a cricketer who did get nervous before you bowled, kind of during a game, or were you just someone actually, because that was such a, playing international cricket, such a novelty, it's the first time you're doing it, of course you're going to be nervous, but generally as a cricketer, are you someone who not struggles, because there's a fine line between actually arousal and anxiety being a positive, but does anxiety get to you with it?
The anxiety gets me a bit in my sleep, because I've struggled with it a lot throughout my career. You know, even before I hit the England scene, there used to be championship games where, you know, again, I was so desperate to do well and I couldn't switch off. And lying in bed, mate, you know, before my first England Lions game, I I literally was, you know, I was lying in bed with that feeling, and it just showed that I couldn't switch off. I couldn't hit that point where it was like, okay, you know, come tomorrow, you'll be fine. You'll think about it. You'll be fine. For me, it was like a constant on my mind, thinking about it all the time, and the effect that had is just on sleep, really. You know, so you end up playing a lot of games where you're actually just exhausted, and you just, you know, you're using all sorts of coping mechanisms to get through. You know,
does it stem from you making a mistake? Does it stem from you getting dropped? Does it stem from
desperation to do well? I think a lot of my, I guess my upbringing, you know, I had come from somewhere we didn't have much money. I went very fortunate to go to school with, you know, on a scholarship and bursary, and you know, I just saw that, you know, me going on and playing for England was a way of earning a bit of money and a bit, you know, kind of changing the family's fortunes, or my fortunes to a certain degree. So it was out of a despotism to do well, so that I could then go on and you know, have a good career in terms of finances, and help the family out, and so on and so forth. So
you kind of now develop strategies?
Oh, mate, it's there constantly, but it changes in its nature all the way through. So initially back then, it was a despotism to do well and prove myself and kick on and play for England. Now it comes down a little bit to, you know, I think when I can say relax, obviously I don't mean it from that point of view. Financially, if I know that I've got a little bit of certainty in terms of, okay, I've got another year in my contract, or I've got another year after that, I tend not to put so much pressure on myself going into games, because you do start to realise it is just a game of cricket, and you've done it over and over again. You get to read the game, you're more experienced, and so on and so forth. But, you know, when, you know, career comes under threat, or, you know, a new coach comes in, or this, that, and the other, and you've not been involved in the side, and then you suddenly get your chance again because of injuries, there's still that, I don't want to mess up. You know, I'm desperate to do well because they've said this and this about me, and that's the reason why I'm not playing. So, you know, I want to do this and this in the game, and, you know, it's still there. It is constant. I work quite closely alongside, you know, psychologists. I think it's quite important, you know, even if it's just someone to talk to. Just be like, this is how I'm feeling very anxious, struggling with this. They will help guide you on that path of what are the best coping strategies. Sleep is massively important in that. And if I'm sitting there going, I'm struggling to sleep, I'm so nervous, I want to do well, it's on my mind all the time, and I'm not sleeping, it's going to affect my performance. For me, all the work I've done with the psychologist has all been individually, so a lot of it is just getting to know myself, getting to know how I respond emotionally to certain things, can come up with better sleep patterns, and working on mindfulness, working on meditation, and all these sort of things, they will contribute and they will add to my own well-being when it comes to training and playing and not being so nervous. One of the best things that has helped me in that regard, even though I still feel it at times now, is getting my life, my personal life, to a place where it's not so important that if I have a bad game, it's not going to, be the end of my career, or it's not going to be the end of my finances. It's I've got other things or other, interests that I could, look into, that mean that, if I fail in cricket, or it doesn't go well, my current contract doesn't go very well, I go, okay, well, I can do this. I've got other little places, other little interests I can look at.
Something to, like, if someone says Stuart Meaker to me, I always think cricket. Is that because for the majority of your life, your identity has been kind of Stuart Meaker cricket? And I know I spoke to a few people recently who have mentioned that where they found a lot more peace is when they started to have things outside of their sport that they can go back to, whether that might be family, whether that might be a kind of a business they've set up, or something that they do. Because I know you've done some volunteer work, because we tried to set this up last week, and but is that it? Is that because the identity of Stuart Meaker as a cricketer, actually you need a break from it?
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say need a break from it. It's just, yeah, I will always be a cricketer. But it's something that I do. We tend to do this. Oh, hi, I'm Stuart Meaker, I'm a cricketer. Or hi, I'm Andy Houston, I'm a teacher. Or sports coach. We almost identify with whatever it is that we do. When in actual fact, that's just something that you do. It's not who you are. And you could be a teacher, but you could also be a coach. You could be a motivational speaker on the side. There's all sorts of other little things that you can do, and if you can get your life, your personal life, to a place where it's not just cricket, it's not just teaching, it's not just this. You've not got one string to your bow. Then you'll find actually it takes all that pressure off. And you can go out and just enjoy the game for what it is.
Yeah.
Ironically, one person who I thought was brilliant at this, even though he got a lot of slack for it, was Kevin Peterson. He was a genius, genuinely a genius, the cricket bat in his hand. And I've never seen someone hit a ball like that, since, and maybe J. Roy probably. But he got his life to a place where he had all sorts of other little businesses and side things on the go. Obviously, fortunately, he got decent sums of money through playing for England. But that time when he got out once and he walked off whistling and he was like singing that little tune to himself, that was just him saying, "Look, mate, at the end of the day, this is a game of cricket. This is a game that we're playing. Okay, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything to me." Doesn't mean that I don't want to do well. Of course I want to do it well every time I go out. But I'm not going to walk off and go and swing from the rafters because, I've gotten out or I've played a silly shot. It's a game of cricket. And I think often we get too caught up. I see it in sportsmen. We see it in the way everyone, in football and other ways of life. It's like, we get too absorbed in it sometimes, and actually we've just got to appreciate and enjoy the game. We get told that from a young age, enjoy the game, but for some reason we lose that when we become professional cricketers. I say, find other things, find other avenues or interests that you could potentially take up, and you'll find that will help your game.
And it's amazing, really, when you think about leadership, is how many great leaders can get that balance between kind of getting a cricket side, for example, to achieve the goal that they've set themselves as a group, but also enjoy the journey they're going on. And I think that's the skill, isn't it, of a great coach. And you'd have come across lots of coaches in your career, and will continue to. The great ones aren't always the ones who have the most amount of knowledge. It's often the ones who can motivate you because you're feeling happy about yourself, but you know they're working with you to take you to the goal that you set yourself. Surrey has a huge amount of very talented players. Looking back now, were there lessons you learned or look back and kind of learn now from those high performance athletes or cricketers? You go, that's what made them so good. Those little bits I kind of picked up from that person. Because obviously you mentioned Kevin Peterson having things and ability to go, look, I want to be competitive. You know, there's other things out there. Were there other things? Because it must have sang your car with you. You've had like countless number of top quality players.
The thing I picked up from people who were doing well in the game still, you know, even later on, the way that they practiced, this is where the professionalism comes in. You know, you'll get some guys who'll come in and they'll do really well, but then they'll get a bit lazy, or they'll get, you know, go out too many times. Ones that are consistent performances or high performance, like I said to you, they are religious with their practice, and they're religious with making sure that they get their basics done. They've found a routine and they don't deviate from that unless it's absolutely necessary or something's going a bit awry in their game. But they keep it very basic too, you know. So cricket is a game of skill, but it's also about consistency, and the consistent ones, which is ironically something that's eluded me for a long time, because I've been chasing my tail with skill and trying to get back to where I was in 2011, 2012, 2013 sort of thing. It's a game of consistency, and the only way you're going to do that well is by consistently practicing over and over and doing the same skills. And
you touched upon there kind of like 2011, 2012, 2013. Would you say that was sort of height of your powers? We're all hoping that kind of this summer we get some cricket, and we're all hoping you come flying down the hill. But looking back now, and it's not your end of your career because you're still relatively young in terms of you're 32 years old. So fingers crossed, look after your body. You've got 4 or 5, even longer years left in it. But when you were at your kind of your prime in terms of 2011, 2012, 2013, you must have spent now 6 years, it sounds like 7 years, chasing that again. But what's been the issue? Has it been injury? Has it been more psychological? What has it been that stopped you from keep progressing up?
I mean, I had two. It seems a bit, you know, easy to blame injury, but you know, in my instance, I still think it was. 2011, 2012, you know, I was doing well, but when I was just starting to hit the England sort of ranks, I started getting Patellar Tendonitis in my right knee, which is, if you know, that's my back leg. It's what holds me in position and so on and so forth. And it doesn't stop you from playing, but it's quite debilitating. It's almost like, imagine someone shoved a fork in your underneath your kneecap and just told you, right, crack on. So it's quite painful, and it affects your mental health as well, because you just know that, you know, you'll be sitting home in the car and it's aching and it's sore, and so therefore you can't switch off, and it's painful and all that sort of stuff. So 2013, I had that operated on, but at the same time I had done my left shoulder from diving, I think, on the outfield in my last game in India, and I went to go and try diving the ball, and I kind of did something to the biceps tendon. So I ended up having a slap lesion and labral decompression in my left shoulder, and then, you know, within a month I then had my knee done as well. So it was a bit of a nightmare, from going from someone who was extremely athletic. I've always been really athletic all the way throughout my life. To then suddenly having strange new restrictive parameters on my body and movement, and suddenly my body didn't move the way that it should, and I just, for the life of me, I could not figure out what was going on. It coincided with a new coach, Graham Ford, coming in 2014, I think it was, roughly. And so we talk about consistency. I would work blooming hard in the gym and go really well, but just with the way my body was working, I couldn't be consistent with where the ball was going. And actually, they reached a point in 2015, I think it was, where it was the closest I've come to calling it all in, because I was running into bowl and I was hitting side netting. Suddenly, all of a sudden, from someone, I mean, I'd always been a bit wayward, but suddenly it was like, it almost felt like the yips, and I couldn't understand it. I genuinely had no idea what was going on. And it was quite worrying for me, suddenly not knowing how to swing the ball, mate, there was a time, I think the lowest it got was, we'd signed Ben Folkes, and he was keeping nearly 2 pitches away. And I was just doing some bowl throughs, and I ended up hitting him 2 or 3 pitches over. Yeah. And he had to miss the game. And I just, obviously this is in the warm up to a game. I wasn't involved. I was just doing my rehab and all that sort of stuff. But, word gets round, like, this has just happened, and it's extremely tough. It's embarrassing.
But also, I guess it's also one of those. I mean, you talked about it with the yips and stuff, and you hear a lot of it in golf, and you're turning around to do a putt, and you just know it's going to miss. I guess kind of you start in your run up going, I just don't know where this is going to go to, and it must be absolutely horrific, because not only is it physiological, there's a huge aspect to end up being psychological. So even if your body is okay, you're thinking it's not, and suddenly, I can imagine that kind of.
It's a combination, it starts off physical, your body changes constantly throughout your life. You're doing something over and over again, you're going to get wrist injuries, you're going to have shoulder injuries, you're going to have, surgery, all sorts of stuff. And all the way through that, your body is constantly trying to fight to kind of find a little new equilibrium. And the problem is that new equilibrium puts a bit more pressure on a certain joint that wasn't there before. And so therefore it changes how your muscles work, something that was so entirely natural before suddenly becomes like, well, you can't do that anymore because you're putting new stresses on certain points. And the psychological side of it was fear in knowing that suddenly doing something that was so entirely natural to you throughout your career just wasn't anymore, and you had to fight like hell to try and find some new way of doing things. And so I think that's what ended up happening to me in 2013, 2014. 2011, 12, 10, 11, 12, I was hooping the ball around at 90 miles an hour away and in, and I was knocking balls over, and it was great. And after that, it was like it started in my wrist, in my shoulder, in my action, and I couldn't hold certain positions, so my timing was completely out. And I got to 2015. I had 1 year left on my contract at Surrey, and I got thrown a Hail Mary from the ECB, from Kevin Shine, and he brought me back on board. He brought me, it was called the PEP, so it's like the young fast bowlers. I'd been on it before, but it's usually meant for your 20, 21-year-olds sort of things, trying to develop them. So I went up to Loughborough, spent the winter with them, and was quite humbling, because suddenly here's this bloke who's played international cricket, and he's now having to live the almost like student life back up at Loughborough, training 5 days a week, and it was tough. But I work my abs. That's one thing that's always kind of helped me through, is I've always made sure that I do my work. I'm not lazy.
Did you find it hard at that stage? So you talked about their humbling. Did you find it quite hard going back into that and then trying to learn it all over again? Was that quite hard?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily learning it all over again. It was just at that stage, mate, I would have taken anything. I didn't want my career to finish. I knew that there was more in me. I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't understand why. And it's humbling, but it was I was desperate and I needed it, and it worked to a certain degree. I got super fit and strong, and I found a way. I got to a point where I just went, you know what, I still bowled really quick, but it wasn't always that accurate. But what kind of helped me was swing and the guile beforehand. Now suddenly I was just like, you know what, just stop trying to swing it. And I almost went to a point where I was running up and bowling wobble seam. All we did in the marquee at Surrey was we used old balls, nothing swung or anything like that, and it was just all about hitting the length, hitting the top of off, hitting the top of off. And it coincided with Michael Divenuto coming in, and he just turned around to me, a bit like what he did with Liam Plunkett, and just said, Meaker, you know what, I don't care if you're going to bowl the odd 4 ball here and there. I just want you to bowl as fast as you can. Be a point of difference in the team. Make stuff happen because of your pace. So it was quite a relief, on top of the fact that I'd worked hard, and then suddenly, just out of nowhere, I just grunted through 25 wickets in that season, and it was a big relief for me. So they offered me a contract halfway through the year, and that was a huge relief. The only problem was I knew that the turmoil I was putting, and impact I was putting my body through, I wouldn't have lasted much longer than another year after that.
As a fast bowler, particularly when you're young, you must put your body through a huge amount of strain, just that repetition, often on hard ground, just continually doing the same thing. And particularly at that time where you can do whatever you like in the gym, but in truth, the only way you're going to get out of it is by bowling. Because to be a good bowler, you need to bowl. Did that take a massive toll on your body?
Yes and no. I mean, it's more the kind of the force that goes through your ankles and your knees, especially with me being a braced front leg. It's 1,000 times the force for each kilo or whatever it is. So, imagine I'm 90 kilos, like 90 times the force, of that going through your leg each time you're landing it. And I think it was more just a worry of, my body was sore, and there was like aches and pains and all that sort of stuff everywhere. But it was more just the fact that in the back of my mind, I was like, geez, I'm not sure if I can do this for much longer. And I think that's why I ended up going back to wanting to get that skill and that guile back, because I knew that my pace isn't going to last forever. It's still up there, but it's not what it was at 19, 20, 21. That can only last. And you know what? You can only do that so many times throughout a season. There is no fast bowler out there that can bowl 90 mile an hour plus throughout an entire season. It cannot work. Your body will break down and your career could finish. Mm-hmm. And which is why I was so desperate to just get that little bit of guile back, that little bit of swing, a bit like Anderson. The reason why he's gone on for so long is he's not bowling anywhere near what he used to when he turned up to England. But I tell you what he is doing now is he's hitting the same spot over and over again with skill.
Yeah.
And you look at Darren Stevens, who plays for Kent. He's 45 years old. He hadn't taken a fifer until after the age of 35. He's now got a stupid amount, I think 30 of them or something like that. You know, so because he's skill and he's craft, and it was just something I was so desperate to get back to, and I being a bit pig-headed, even though the physio was saying, don't try it, don't do this, just run up and bowl this, blah, blah. I was like, that's all well and good, but I won't have much of a career knowing how much I was putting my body through at the time if I can't, if I don't get this right. It didn't help that we'd signed Mornay Morcall and Ricky Clark, so that doesn't help. But in a way, that probably signing of Mornay Morcall got me to a point where I was like, right, well, I've got to get that guard back. I've got to get that swing back, because I can't compete with someone like a Mornay Morcall.
Yeah.
Just in pure pace and height and all that sort of stuff. So, I was a bit pig-headed and bloody-minded. And even last year, I was trying to do it. We got interrupted a bit last year with obviously COVID and missing out on half the season. But for some reason or whatever, it seems to be creeping its way back in at the moment, and it's a good feeling. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself, if that makes any sense.
Was it hard to leave Surrey by the end?
Yeah, incredibly hard. But it was the right decision on a number of fronts. I knew I was going to struggle to play a lot, especially from the previous season, and we'd suddenly signed a whole heap of bowlers that I knew were just going to keep pushing me further down the pecking order.
Yeah.
And couple that with, I'd just gone through a massive breakup and divorce, and I think it was a real opportunity for me to kind of just go, I need a change. I need a change of scenery. I need a fresh look at things. When you are at a club for such a long time, you get boxed as someone who can only do one thing. So I knew I was never going to play T20 cricket. I was never going to play in the one-day stuff, because they just didn't see me that way. The only way they saw me was someone who could run in and bowl quick and hit people on the head. And I was like, there's more to me than that. I'm just needing that final magic bullet that's just going to change my fortunes a little bit. And, it's proved to be a good move. James Kirtley has been brilliant down here. He's a kind of coach I wish we'd had at Surrey for a long time. And
because obviously, I'm fascinated with coaching and that leadership style. What is it about him that's made him such a good coach? What makes him such a good coach for you?
He just gets it, mate. I think he himself he climbed to fame, quite quickly, and he was a tearaway quick, and then he had his shoulder issues, and he had to find a way after that. So he gets it. He gets that you're not always the same bloke you are all the way throughout your career. Not, some guys get lucky and other guys don't. But it's also, there was an element of just taking a bit of pressure off, but then also just allowing me to kind of explore a little bit, things I wanted to do. But also he's got a lot of good attention to detail, and he sticks to basics when it comes to the coaching. It was kind of stuff I used to do with Welshie at school. You would get the video out, you'd get the slow-mo stuff and draw angles and all that sort of jazz. And all those little things, they help push you further into, maybe I've tried muck around with this angle, do this, or change my grip here, this and that and the other. And then suddenly something just clicks or reminds you of what you used to do, and you're on your way. And it was that little bit of attention to detail I think I probably missed a different perspective on it, because a lot of those coaches had known me for many years. So it's been really good, and fingers crossed it keeps going that way.
And have you set yourself some goals now? Kind of, what are you, 32? Have you given yourself like some targets? Because obviously when you're younger, we always talk about target setting or goal setting. But actually, sometimes when you get older, you become more realistic to things. Have you set yourself some clear goals?
In terms of performance, I want to win games. I want to help the club win games. It's usually my, I could sit here and say, oh, I want to take 50 wickets this season and I want to score 900 runs. Like that can sometimes be circumstantial a little bit. For me, if I'm helping the club win games, that means I'm in a great place. It means I'm being picked for a start, which always helps. And it means I'm going to be enjoying my cricket if we're winning games. And I'll let everything else take care of itself. I will play this game for as long as I possibly can, and whilst I'm still enjoying it. I'm getting back to a place now where, fingers wood, and it's only been in the last 3 weeks or so that I've clicked on something that could potentially mean I get back to a place where I'm enjoying it again.
Yeah.
And it's been a long old road. As you know, like I said, it was that initial kind of up on the roller coaster and then down and then back up a little bit again. And it's start of January even I was kind of like, I've got 2 years left in this game and that's it. But now for some reason, in the space of a day or a week, it's clicked and suddenly it's just given me that little bit of hope to go, great. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I don't want to go, right, I'm going to take 50 poles. I'm going to go back and play for England. I will always endeavour to try and play this game at as high level as I possibly can, so long as I'm still enjoying the game.
Let's say you became a coach and you were standing in front of the next generation of young bowlers. What advice would you be giving them?
For me, I was always really motivated. And sometimes I see young lads that come through and they like to play the game and it's a bit fun here and there, but they don't have that same drive. And so like any young lad or lady coming through in any sport that wants to do well, find what it is within you that's motivating you and always hold on to that.